아닌 김정은 원수님의 생년사를 끓는 가슴마다에 받아안고 조소와 일터마다에서 새로운 대한민국을 바라볼 세차를 일으켜 나가고 있는 지금 건설 부문에서도 신의 봉화가 타오르고 있다. 경연 원수님의 생년사를 얻기 받면서 정성난 기간
In this day and age, people require modern information and communication technology for just about everything they do. Contemporary transmission devices such as phones, computers, tablets, and televisions are now necessary to stay properly informed. In spite of this, a large percent of population does not have the access to such technology. As a result of this, one of the most monumental issues today has arisen: digital divide. It refers to the gap between the percentage of the population with proper access to contemporary information and communication technology and the one without it. This has allowed governments to manipulate their people.
One of the primary causes of this issue is internet censorship at the hands of the government. By restraining proper access to information and communications technology from citizens, governments have managed to manipulate citizens' viewpoints on politics, religion, culture, and education, as well as economy to their own benefit. A prominent example of this is North Korea. It's notorious for being extremely secluded from the rest of the world in order to suppress the information that could harm their public image. To do this, the government has gone as far as to ban foreign media from within the nation, replacing it with their own propaganda. By doing this, they have led much of their population to have a predominantly positive outlook on them, in spite of their seemingly endless list of fundamental defections. Less than 25% of North Korea's population has internet access. Of this, the only ones with access to foreign media websites are a few high-level government officials and the students from a few select universities, to whom a small number of strictly monitored computers are provided. The rest of its population has to settle with the country's own internet, The only news which can be viewed there are all managed by the North Korean Central News Agency, which is owned by the government. It's because of this deception that even though 40% of the country's population, which consists of about 24 million people, live below the poverty line, most workers earn about $2 to $3 a month, food shortages are the norm, healthcare is denied to most of the population, and an overwhelming amount of people have resorted to drugs like meth to ease the pain of the situation, that an estimated 63% of North Koreans support the government.
Biased TV news sources are another of the primary causes for this issue. For nearly as long as news companies have broadcast stories on TV, corrupt governments have manipulated whatever information they air. This is a problem because people without access to other news sources are at risk of being manipulated if whatever news source they do not have access to turns out to be biased. The government of Burma is a prime example of this. The Burman government owns the vast majority of the national news companies. Any stories related to religion, ethnicity, politics, and morality are constantly being overseen by the government. Freedom of speech and the press are not guaranteed by law. Many colonial-era laws regulating the press and information continue to be used.
News companies' need for relevance has been exploited by political authorities. In order to make money, news companies need popular headlines. Governments like that of Donald Trump have used loopholes to gain popularity and acquire power. A great deal of Trump's polemical statements made gargantuan headlines during his election campaign. These headlines were mostly found across news telecasts, radiocasts, and magazines. Most of the lower American population, which consists about 55 million people, have only access to news through these lower price mediums. Without access to digital news, these headlines weren't as prominent. Their repeated exposure meant that many of these people were bound to favor Trump when the time vote arrived. For example, according to a report from Pew Research, when asked to name the main source for news about the campaign, 40% of Trump voters cited Fox News on radio and TV. Trump's image has been noted to be most possibly in Fox News.
People with limited access to different media are more exposed to political manipulation because they are forced to obtain their information only based on the sources that the government allows. In contrast, citizens who have access to various news platforms are less exposed to political manipulation because they are able to choose their media source of preference, to compare and contrast information of diverse platforms, and get access to information quicker. These people get access to news through national and international television, newspapers, social media, and can even refer to the source that provides them with the most reliable information. There are countless examples of countries where the government controls journalism and media. Venezuela, North Korea, Syria, Cuba, Mexico, Burma, Saudi Arabia, where citizens are often left with very limited access to news sources and are subjected to limit their knowledge to what the government broadcasts. Having access to various media sources also allows citizens to compare and contrast news in order to develop a more well-rounded and objective point of view. By being able to evaluate the different sides of the story, compare the point of view of liberals versus conservatives, national versus international news, Republicans versus Democrats, or even socialism versus capitalism. Citizens who have to wait for the government to broadcast news are more vulnerable to political strategies, as governments are known to delay the release of news for their convenience, like delaying the release of electoral results decisions taken, controversial events, or even international news.
As grim and seemingly inescapable as these issues may seem, the power to fix them is still in the hands of the people. For example, in China and North Korea, a few proxy sites have been created with the purpose of helping people know if a website has been censored in their country and help them access foreign media. By supporting these businesses' expansion, we could combat internet censorship. As for biased TV news sources, lack of access to ICT, and the exploitation of news topics, educating citizens on how to compare and contrast news between all the sources available to them would be the best solution to these dilemmas.